Okay, good morning again. This is yet another session of PAD 403 Democratic Studies. And we have been discussing issues relating to democracy for a couple of weeks now. And our last lecture was on fundamental human rights. And it will interest you to understand today that last week's lecture. And if you take a retrospective analysis of what we have been discussing in the last few weeks, you would understand that each of these topics are related and they all concern how one can have a firm grasp and understanding of what democracy is about in terms of the principles and practices of democracy, tracing it from the Greek city-states, the earliest forms of democracy that were considered as direct democracy, and the whole arrangement, the whole gamut of discussions that borders on fundamental human rights. It will interest you to also note that we have discussed issues on party system, we have discussed issues on how elected representatives uh, are elected to represent the interest of the masses. We have discussed on how democracy has attended a central stage in the discourse of the affairs of lay claim to democratic principles and practices. And we have said that the whole hallmark of democracy is number of persons, and it is a system that reflects the when governance is concerned. So in our last lecture, rights that are accorded to an individual by virtue of human rights, how it is contained in and issues that others around for it, and certain aspects that can limit the practices of these laws, of these rights. So today we shall be looking at the sources of fundamental human rights and how they have aided the discussions on how the interest of people, the will of the masses, and the rights that are accorded to individuals can be best protected under the law. So, having said that, we shall be discussing again in furtherance of our last discussion on fundamental human rights by focusing and laying emphasis on certain aspects that concerns fundamental human rights. Remember, we have said that the whole idea of democracy is how the interest of the masses, the governance of his or her democracy. The most popularly known of them all is the one that describes it as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It means, therefore, that the whole idea of democracy revolves around the opinion, the popular opinion as held in the state, the popular opinion as conceived within what reflects the interest of the masses. So democracy, as we all know, it's all about the individual and the majority rule, unlike other systems where the will of a few persons or few decision makers reign supreme. So the whole idea of democracy is in tandem with attaining the most faith and desire and dignity of masses, the mass of the people, the majority of the people, and how they tend to shape to influence decision making. So in that, the issues of fundamental human rights will be looked at yet again. We say that fundamental human rights are inalienable rights, and then there are rights that are accorded to an individual by virtue of being citizen on one hand, and by virtue of being of system, because beyond the notion of protection of human rights Sorry, I apologize for the little network challenge we are experiencing. However, we will try to expedite the process to ensure that we do not continue to face these network glitches without passing the information that we have to pass across today. So, having said that, like I said, today's topic will center on the sources of law and human rights. And we say that the chief source of administrative law are the constitution of the country, the statutes, and the resolutions passed by the legislature of the country, charter, local body acts granted and enacted by the legislature, ordinances, rules, regulations, resolutions, orders, directions, and decisions, etc., etc., issued by the administrative authority, by the administrative authorities, judicial decisions of the court, customs, and conventions. In this aspect are the sources of law of the Nigerian state, aside institutions that protect the rights of people, the courts. They are also enshrined in the Constitution, and the Constitution is always the utmost or the highest level of reference when it comes to issues of dispute or issues of laws as it concerns and as it concerns human rights. The references can be made to the laws that issue fundamental human rights. So these are all aspects through which there are laws that govern human rights and other affairs and other considerations as it concerns the stability of the system and the conduct of affairs within the system. So within the Nigerian context, we have this checklist of bodies that governs or that lays the conduct of affairs, particularly as it relates to human rights. They are self-explanatory, especially when one looks at the numbers, local body acts granted and enacted by the legislature, ordinances, rules, regulations. They are all aspects and sources of law. Some relates to the international body in itself, some relates to the establishment of institutions that protect human rights, others are documents that references can be made to when there are issues that deserves clarity as it concerns fundamental human rights. The importance of human rights to citizens. In any given state, citizens are endowed with rights because without them, they may not be able to function optimally or perform their civic obligations to the state. Put differently, Rights are corollaries to duties. For example, a man has not only the right to, he has the right also to be an adequate wages for his labor. Related to this is a right to power. Every adult citizen has the right to indicate the person he desires should be elected. If the body of voters is limited, the welfare realized usually excludes that of the persons excluded. But just as those who choose cannot be drawn from any special class in the state, so also those who are choosing cannot be members of a limited section only. You remember in the course of the introductory segments of this lecture, I told you how related the topics discussed so far have been, and the fact that it tends to guide an understanding of the generality of what we have been discussing, which revolves around democracy and democratic principles and practices. So we also made mention of how leaders are elected. Right to elevate, you are liberation from ourselves. Discussion. I still wonder why people get your WhatsApp group. Time people check the lectures here delivered, and I want to believe that you look at them